And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You have made it through this holiday week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, amazing Christmas dinners. And if nobody's thanking you for all of your efforts out there, Dr. D and I, we're going to thank you. So thank you for all that you do for food safety. If you're new, pull up a chair. This is the Food Safety Chat Live. And every Friday, without fail, we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we live stream at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And I have the pleasure of bringing on an amazing food safety expert like Dr. Darin Detwiler, and we take your questions on a particular topic. So we got a ton to go over here today. So we'll, of course, if you don't know who Dr. Darin Detwiler is, first of all, come on, get with the program here. This guy is an icon of food safety for sure.
No, I'm just one of Santa's many elves.
Oh, Larry's jumping in with a dad joke for us already. What are you trying to do? Take over my dad jokes? What is this? All right, what we got here? Why did Santa not deliver toys down the chimney? Because the supply was on strike at Amazon. That they are. Oh, Larry's off to a good start today. And he's getting a jump on this because one of the things that we do here on the Food Safety Chat is we let everybody know where in the world you are at. And of course, I am in Loveland, Colorado, where it's going to be a very nice, around 50 degrees here today. Where are you at, Darin?
I am near Los Angeles, California,
where it's always nice and beautiful and pretty.
I am right here by the beach, about a block away, and can't complain.
There you go. Duncan's here. Good to see you, Duncan. I hope everybody had a fantastic Christmas. How was yours, Darin?
It's good. We went inland a little bit, went to some relatives, and actually the relatives happened to live where I went to high school. And so early Christmas morning, walked around town, early morning walk, because it was more of an adult Christmas. The kids were really to the Christmas Eve, and got to walk around the town where I went to high school, and realized I went to high school, graduated in the 80s. And so there's a lot of differences, a lot of changes in the town there. But it was a very nice walk, and it was a good Christmas get together, and then we went to open house, but there were so many people that we just kind of slipped out pretty early.
Nice.
And then we got back to, my wife and I kind of had our own little Christmas gift exchange at our house on Christmas night, and here we are.
So you're open the presents on Christmas night. Family. It's always interesting.
Well, it was because of, if we weren't going traveling to be at other people's houses, we would have done it Christmas morning. But because we had Christmas morning, with the relatives, and so we had Christmas evening, just the two of us.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's always interesting, and how those, it kind of rolls over, because in our family it was, nope, we wait until Christmas morning to open presents, and you try and cajole your dad into, oh, come on, can we just open? No. Can we just what? No. you will wait. It's like, oh.
Yeah, I think it really depends. Like, if you have guests over for Christmas Eve, then it's always like the kids get a Christmas Eve kind of one present or whatever, and I've had Christmas. I had Christmas in the Navy, which is very different. And I've had Christmas in Hawaii before, which is again very different. It's like Christmas evolves. Plus, my children are adults now, so it's like seeing the evolution of things. But it's kind of like. Well, this is a bad segue. It's kind of like watching the evolution of food safety recalls over the course of a year.
There you go. Nice. Yep. One quick little, so you got me thinking now about foreign Christmases. So one year, my wife and I were in Hong Kong for Christmas. And so with the skyline on Hong Kong Island, we were on Kowloon. So that's the side that faces the normal view that you see of the skyscrapers. They light up all the buildings with all these colored lights. And on one of the buildings was an animated Santa, which was really cool. But he was playing the bongos.
Okay.
So he would go like this. Right? It's just like, Okay, kind of cool, but how the hell did they come up with that? Duncan here. I successfully got my dad to open a bottle of whiskey a day early once. Nice.
Excellent.
That's a good one. Oh, speaking of presents and thank you. So back here, whoop, next to my book, there's a little card here that says, "You are a badass." And that was a very nice present from Corey Muse of Muse Safety Solutions. So she sent me that and some clown snake stickers. So that was nice. So thank you, Corey, for that gift. Greatly appreciate that. So it's now got a place of honor on my desk because that is too cool.
I got some cards from some families that are I've connected with over the years and who are dealing with, the long-term effects of foodborne illnesses. And, I have to admit, just like we were talking about how everyone, celebrates Christmas differently. It's pretty amazing to see how families impacted by food safety deal with not only the lingering issues and the after effects, the aftermath of a foodborne illness with a child, but also the holidays. The holidays after something like that are always very different, and I'm very touched when people have included me in their thoughts because of the way I've reached out to them and things of that nature. I mentioned earlier, that I've experienced holidays in different situations. I have to admit the first holidays after losing a child due to food safety failures is also kind of one of those, especially if you have other kids, because if you have other kids, you're trying to make sure that there's the Christmas for them, but as a parent, you're kind of balancing a lot of issues, but.
Right, trying to keep up, for them. Oof, yeah, that's tough for sure. So everybody here on this Friday, please join Darin and I for a drink now of your favorite beverage. What you got today, Darin? Cool.
Protein drink, because protein drinks.
Got my normal traditional coffee. Yeah, so here in Loveland, there was some pretty high profile news. I don't know if it made it out there or not, but there was a big robbery here at a police station.
At a police station?
Yeah, and it was pretty amazing. So I was reading over this story. All of their toilets were stolen, and of course they're investigating, right? But they were following up on the story, saying that the police are very, very upset because they have absolutely nothing to go on.
I was hoping that was going to lead somewhere. I was happy to hear that is what happened there. Well, I had the youngest. I made the youngest kid on Christmas Eve at our family gathering laugh. I have a Christmas joke. She knows her alphabet, and I said, "Hey, of all the letters of the alphabet, the letter E is the only letter that got Christmas presents from Santa." Do you know why? Do you know why?
Why is that? Why is that?
Because all the others are naughty.
Oh, that deserves another rim shot. Oh, bad day to be a Snifford. Too funny. So what's fun about these chats, so as you can kind of tell, we're kind of being a little more casual here today, right? It's holiday week, but this time of year, if you work in quality, right? Number one, food safety never stops, never sleeps. We never stop eating. Food always needs to be safe and wholesome, and all of that ties into what we do and kind of the 24/7 nature of our activities. And this time of year, Darin, it's a perfect time to sit back and reflect because the offices tend to be closed down a little bit, not as much activity going on. And man, don't miss that opportunity. This is the perfect time to plan out those activities and the things that you want to do in 2025 and really think about that and how you're going to be doing that. And really that kind of gets back to, and you and I have talked about this in the past, is we've done shows on, okay, over the past 30 years, we've done a lot of good stuff. And it's nice to look and reflect and look at the different things that we've been working on and have pride in our accomplishments. But as we know in food safety, just like everything in life, if you're not improving, it's degrading. So part of what we wanted to look at here today is moving forward over the next 30 years of, okay, what's the legacy we want to leave for that next generation of people that are coming up? So Jocelyn's and other people that are in our chats here who are picking up that mantle and moving food safety kind of to that next level. And how do we build on what we have learned is kind of our theme for today. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say too, sometimes it seems like it's like that one step forward and two steps back kind of a thing too. I mean,
yeah.
I got to tell you, how many times have I talked to journalists, which happens quite often, by the way. And it's as if this is the first time something has happened like this. It's the first time. We've never had this before. Nothing's never. It's like, oh, yeah, it has. Yeah, it has. This is not a first, And at the same time, talk about conflicting news coverage. One minute you're looking at all these people at Costco buying, entire flatbeds. It's like, how can anyone, buy 500 eggs at once, kind of a thing, and it becomes like a supply and demand thing. People filling up their grocery carts with multiple 24 packs of raw eggs, and then the next minute, now you're dealing with a recall of these eggs from Kirkland sold at Costco. One minute you're dealing with the news coverage of the E. coli contaminated onions on the McDonald's quarter pounders. The next minute, oh, but hey, McRib's back. One minute, it's like you get almost like this whiplash in terms of such conflicting, things about food. And then during the holidays, it's almost impossible to separate the holidays and family gatherings from food, and people, everything from people buying food that's delivered or pre-packaged or pre-cooked or buying tons of ingredients and assembling it in the kitchen and, making recipes and then leaving food out for a long period of time. And I think it's crazy. I mean, I was talking with some relatives. They're like, yeah, we just had some food delivered someone was saying that their microwave stopped working, so they just ordered food on Grubhub. I'm like, who orders food on Grubhub at 7:30 at night on Christmas Eve? And apparently, yeah, Grubhub got there with food, kind of a thing. It's like, okay, wow, but I mean, I'm not saying that anyone's right or wrong for doing X, Y, or Z, but it's just amazing how, I mean, you and I were talking before about how, there's the Christmas Story movies, and everything was about, the turkey and I don't know if people joining us have watched this, but the original Christmas Story movie, the one with the Red Ryder BB gun, it took place in 1940. So it's like kind of post-Depression, but pre-World War One. And everything was about, minimalizing their food. It was always like mashed potatoes and spinach or cabbage or whatever and meatloaf. And they were going to splurge by making the turkey. But then the spoiler alert from a 1983 movie here, the neighbor's dog somehow got in and grabbed and ran off and ate the turkey. So, Bryan, do you remember what the family did for Christmas dinner because their dinner was ruined?
No, I don't remember. What happened?
They went to the only place in town that's open for dinner on Christmas.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The Chinese restaurant, right?
Chinese restaurant. which became, I mean, that's still a big thing. People going to Chinese food restaurants for for those holidays kind of things. But again, it's like even our Christmas movies, many of which you find that food is central to the gathering and to the telling of the stories, and meanwhile we're doing all this, and what's the conversation around my, well, not the table, but around the pre-meal table, my family gathering was, hey, Darin, what's going on with that outbreak? Hey, Darin, what's going on with that? Hey, Darin, what's going on with that? I literally did CBS News television on Thanksgiving Day, and this week I did CBS News radio on Christmas Day, of all things. So there's no end. It's like there's no end. You can't separate the two these days. Actually, you can't separate the three. You can't separate out the family gathering / holiday from the meals and however they are prepared or delivered or purchased or whatever, and the conversations around all these recalls and allergens and food safety things.
Well, it's kind of interesting too, isn't it? Those ones that make it to the surface with the public, because we see all of this, all of the activity behind the scenes, all of the smaller recalls, all of the warning signs, and then to your point, Darin, we get these ones that bubble up. So Boars Head, McDonald's, and then we start getting the questions. And with the Boars Head one in particular, right? And I don't know if you saw this letter in Food Safety News from the widow of one of the people whose husband died, and how she wouldn't have a Christmas to spend with her husband anymore because he was gone. And it was just heartbreaking. And it's always important. I think that human connection, and I think that's why you're so valuable and so important to food safety, is that personal connection. If you haven't experienced that, and God forbid, no one wants to go through that, but that's a pain that never goes away. And it's unnecessary, right? And people see these things, and then it reaches that point, and we're like, okay, well, why didn't we stop these things from happening in the first place? And that's kind of around what we wanted to talk about here today, because I mean, with the McDonald's recall in particular, right? It wasn't, as we were talking about as we were getting ready for the show. It wasn't. It's not the McDonald's recall, really. It's the Taylor Farms recall for the onions. And
it's almost as if the media, latched onto that, and it's held on to that. I also think not only is it weird in terms of they call it the McDonald's recall, right, or outbreak, but it's been they keep talking about the Boars Head recall. Well, it's kind of like missing the big point. It's not a Boars Head recall. It's a deadly outbreak. Yeah. 10 people are dead, and yet it's like it softens the blow to just refer to it as a recall as opposed to a deadly outbreak. But it would not be a recall if it was not a deadly outbreak. And so it's like, well, who's using these? Who's using these terms? I mean, if in the world of sports, a playoff is a playoff, a championship's a championship. In the world of pick a field, right? We have words, we hold on those words, but for some reason, it's like, well, if there's an outbreak and a recall, let's just call it a recall, because you know what? We become myopic, and maybe even there's a bit of fatigue around these. It'll just get lost in all the recalls that are going on, as opposed to that deadly outbreak that stands out, kind of a thing.
Right. Right.
It just, to me, someone just Bana just mentioned PR machines. Definitely, there are these spins, that go on, and a lot of times it's kind of like playing around with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or playing around with Archie Carroll's pyramid of corporate social responsibility. It's a supply and demand issue. It's it's an economic issue. It's a this issue. And I did I think you and I talked about this before. I did a comparison of looking at I did this with the Jack and Bucksy Cola outbreak with 1993, looking at the difference in headlines in newspapers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and how national newspaper coverage was different than the state and local newspaper paper coverage. But I also took a look at the Chipotle outbreaks from a while back and was able to find here like all the major newspaper coverage. And yeah, you'd find some, oh, this is outbreak with Chipotle, this outbreak with Chipotle. But then you find all these other things during that period of time. Oh, Chipotle agrees to invest in, small businesses. Chipotle focus on leadership development within their company. Oh, Chipotle free kids meals on Sunday. Oh, free. So like they're playing off of all these different, social gathering or social belonging or self-actualization and self-esteem or the economic issue and it's actually advanced a bit because it used to be that it was after an incident that you'd start to see some of this. Now you're seeing this a lot more during these incidents, right? And the one thing that most families, and we talked about families dealing with the fact that they have a family member, usually a child, who's very sick as a result of a failure in food safety, or they've buried a child, and now they're dealing with the upcoming holidays. For a while, especially when we had more E. coli outbreaks due to meat, we still have them, but not nearly as much. The good majority of illnesses and deaths would take place usually around the summer. The summer was kind of the bump. Because barbecues and camping and things like that, right?
Yeah. And
then you have Thanksgiving and Christmas would come up, and the sad thing was not only were families dealing with the holidays, of course, very connected to food, but usually by about that time, a couple months after a major outbreak, all of a sudden, the news coverage of the outbreak was, this company is rebounding economically after this major event. How will this industry rebound economically after this? Oh, look how much their stock has grown since this outbreak. Oh, the change in leadership. It's like, okay, so these families get to hear or read about the how the companies are rebounding economically after these events, but those impacted and their families, they don't get to just have a do-over like on a video game or something like that. And it happens every single time.
Yeah. And that kind of rolls into, and great comments coming here, guys. Thank you. Is that this kind of rolls into what we wanted to talk about here today. And the title of our talk around this is, are we just treating the symptoms of a disease, right? So if you go to a doctor, you're like, hey, I'm not feeling well or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, you got some pain? Yeah, I got some pain. Okay, here's some pain pills. Well, wait, why do I have the pain? Oh, I don't know. Just here, take these pills and go away. And if you run out of the pills and the pain is fine, you're probably good. And if not, come back and I'll give you some more pain pills. What? Or, on TV, Darin, we're constantly inundated now with all of these pharmaceutical ads, right? So, hey, are you overweight? Take this cool new drug and inject yourself and you'll magically lose weight. Well, what about the reason why I'm overweight in the first place? And what are the side effects? Don't worry about that. You'll be fine. And we see this time and time again. And so part of this is we were looking at this from the calculus standpoint. Why is this? To your point, Darin, say, okay, you're an executive at a company and you're working at Chipotle, right? And you have this massive multi-billion-dollar slide in your stock price. Right? You're thinking, oh, geez, right? And the board of directors is going, hey, turn this shit around and get that stock price back up. What are you doing? Come on, we have shareholders who demand this. Okay, fine, right? And then they focus on that. And part of this is why does that happen? And when you look at the food industry in the United States, right, it's like an $850 billion industry, gigantic industry. And every now and then, companies get fined for food safety issues. Pretty rare, really, that they actually get fined, right? We were kind of going over the list when we were talking about this, right? There was like Bluebell got fined.
Chipotle was big at the time. Chipotle was $25 million, which to me and you, I'm sure seems like a lot of money, but realize that was a drop in the bucket compared to like their quarterly revenue kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then right after that, what was it, like a month or two after that was Bluebell. It was slightly smaller, but it was still a large amount. And then earlier this year, was the largest Department of Justice fine. That was Family Dollar stores.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot of people saying, well, what will be the outcome in terms of Boar's Head? Will they pay a huge fine, or will they be criminally, held criminally liable for
Right.
those 10 deaths? In comparison, you could say that sanitation failures and having the evidence, it was very similar to Boar's Head was very similar to Family Dollar, but in terms of like the deaths, it's very similar to Peanut Corporation of America. And what I find crazy too is this is back to something we said earlier. Peanut Corporation of America, of course, if you're in the food industry or within the food safety arena, you know about Peanut Corporation of America, especially because of the landmark court sentencing for all the nearly 100 federal felony convictions, right?
Yeah.
When you talk to the average person out there, they've never heard of it.
Nope.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And yet, everyone's heard of the Boar's Head, and they've heard of the E. coli at McDonald's, and they've heard of, certain other outbreaks, kind of a thing. It's also weird what's in people's awareness and what's not in their awareness.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, when you look at it just from a risk assessment standpoint, you have this massive $850 billion industry. And like we're talking about here, you have a fine with Family Dollar, which the agencies weren't even taking action until a whistleblower stepped forward and posted pictures online. They were fined $41 million. That's 0.005% of that $850 billion industry. Right? So if you're just looking at it from a what's my chance of getting caught standpoint, right? Teeny, tiny. And your chances of getting in trouble for something on this are small. And if you're the CEO of a food company, number one, do you have food experience? Maybe, probably not. I mean, the main reason CEOs are hired is because they know how to run a company. They know how to have the right team around them. They know how to make sure the stock price is good, keep costs low. They aren't hired because of food safety knowledge. And when you talk with CEOs, by and large, that's why I hire people, right? That's why I hire all these technical people, is to manage all this stuff so I can run the company. So they don't even view that as part of their role.
I can't tell you how many times I've worked with companies where it was run by the founder, the CEO, and then at some point they either walk away or retire, and they appoint or hand over the reins, whatever process they go through, to their chief legal counsel. How many times a lawyer is in charge of a company now? And there was a really cool, well, not cool, but there was a really eye-opening, I guess I should say. And if you're the one who put it out there on LinkedIn, kudos to you. It was an image of a boardroom and an empty seat and a question mark in terms of where's the food safety, where's the FSQA leader, where's the person in charge of food safety. We all know that there's different names depending on what company. You could be a VP or director or whatever, but it was a really good point, because I have run into so many companies where all these decisions are made, and then they'll loop in the food safety leader, or the food safety leader says, we need to do this. And they have to go through the director of finance, as part of the decision-making thing. And it's like, where is the director of food safety, the ultimate leader, food safety leader in a company, in terms of where they sit in the boardroom? And I think it's got to be a little bit more, significant. You see how in other industries, right? In the military, the flight officer is very close to the ship, aircraft carrier's commanding officer, or a medical officer has a direct line to the commanding officer, because of the crew's health, kind of a situation. And yet you don't see that the same way. At the same time, if airlines, for instance, were to say, look, we have 5,000-6,000 flights, I don't even know, maybe it could be way more, I don't know. we have 20,000 flights a day, with just our airlines. And so, when one or two planes crash, it's just a small drop in the bucket. Look at all the other ones that were successful. No
Yeah.
one wants to fly that airlines. You know what I mean? No one wants to say that in front of a camera on the news. And yet, the cost of doing business kind of a situation. It's almost as if, it's a cost of doing business. These things happen. We'll throw some money at it. We'll get our PR team to do an extra special emergency meeting and crank out some news coverage that'll distract people from the facts here. And this might sound like, well, that sounds like what do you call that? Not a controversy, but that sounds like a ridiculous theory there, Darin. But here's the deal. Remember the Chipotle CEO who went after the CDC because how dare the CDC release our name? And come to find out that even other companies threatened health. This happens all the time. Companies during their investigation of an outbreak, even knowing that they're the ones at the center of the outbreak, they will threaten to sue the health department, the state health department, the county health department, even the CDC in terms of how dare they reveal to the public our name, kind of a deal, and this stuff goes on. And I get it, there are legal avenues, but there's also the fact that, be responsible, own up for what you're doing and try to resolve these issues. And it's to the point where there are companies like Costco and Trader Joe's that do an incredible job, by the way, in terms of calls and communicating with people. And not the military, media, the media asks questions like, oh, wow, are they doing a really good job? Yeah, they are doing a really good job. Well, why don't other companies do the same job? I don't know, because they don't have the same playbook, I guess, in terms of other companies. But it's a weird issue when you look at even just this year, the coverage of outbreaks. One of the surprising things that it got a little bit of coverage, but I don't think it got as much coverage as it should have is, one of the most, there was the Boars Head and the onions. We also had cucumbers and cantaloupe and leafy green, and there was peanuts. There was a new outbreak of listeria they don't know the source of. I just read about this morning. There's so many different things, but the one that I thought should have had a little bit more press coverage was the heavy metals and lead specifically in the cinnamon in applesauce. That's crazy. That's not like an accident happened kind of a thing. That's not, we should have done more testing kind of a thing. That is how many steps along the way from that source should have tested to make sure that this was not in there.
Right.
And, the idea that, who's eating the applesauce? Probably your most vulnerable people, the very young, the elderly, et cetera, kind of a deal. But, the severity and likelihood seems to be something that's kind of thrown out the door here with a lot of these issues this year.
Right. And that's a great segue, Darin, because we were talking about that is kind of that risk assessment piece. So as food safety professionals, we're very used to looking at that risk assessment piece in our food safety plans, in our plants. It's like, okay, well, what's the severity and likelihood of this? And we've talked about this before where, well, maybe our methodologies aren't the best at figuring out what our risk actually is, but we're thinking about it. And that is not done at the executive level at all in companies. The only risk assessment they're talking about, as you alluded to, is the stock price or the reputation of the company or future marketing plans, to Larry's point here. They're not looking at it from that standpoint, from a food safety risk standpoint. They're looking at it from a business risk, and they're not even thinking about it because, going back again, even if they do, and if maybe a food safety lawyer or a legal person on the executive team is like, well, when it comes down to it, the chances of us getting fined for a food safety issue pretty small. So, we'll kind of let that slide.
Well, one of the things I don't get is that, E. coli, salmonella, allergens, listeria, they don't change definitions, or they don't change likelihood and severity, if you will, when you go from one state or one region or one plant to another, right?
Mhm.
And the impact on people's health, their lives, those don't change, right? And you look at the idea of a major, like, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, you look at a major McDonald's, right? Lay's, Frito-Lay, right?
Yeah.
Those corporate brands, they know that people want to have consistency. But what gets me is when it comes to those likelihood and severity estimates within food safety plans, why are those different based on location? So just before we started recording here, we were talking about Frito-Lay
Yeah.
and how there was it Washington and Oregon? There was the undeclared milk allergen.
Right.
To me, this is one of those things where a food safety plan is devised locally, not corporate wide. And why is a company's an umbrella of a company name okay with a region saying, well, we're going to do this in terms of food safety? It's like there should be kind of a more unified look in terms of the food safety plans and collaboration and unification. There may be some differences here and there, but not when it comes to likelihood and severity of allergens. That would
Right.
be consistent through all of the products under the umbrella of that corporate brand name. And yet
Right.
we see this. On the other side, we see, of all the things, the carrot recall this year caught my attention because what was it, like 14, 15, 16 states
Yeah.
getting the
Huge.
delivery of all these carrots from a farm out of California. And to me, we're a country that we're dealing with companies that have fought really hard to make it such that the federal government cannot require them to test and hold their
Mhm.
product. They can release a product, take a sample, and send it out for analysis, and the test results come back. And by the time results come back, well, it's already distributed in this case to 19 states. But here's the deal: cucumbers, cantaloupe, carrots, those onions, right? No kill step. I think
Mhm.
we need to rethink when you have centralized and wide distribution of things for which there's no kill step, and you're rushing it out there. What could we do? Imagine the impact of a 24-hour hold on certain foods with no kill step that would go out to multiple states. Now, maybe, here's a thought. Maybe that farm, and I'm not a carrot farmer, okay, but maybe that carrot farm could say, look, we're going to distribute it immediately to California, but we're going to wait until we go across state lines for 24 hours because we want those test results to come back.
Mhm.
You know, take a page out of the plan from Canada, what they do up there. And when certain food companies have not yet proven their capability of preventing certain problems, they're limited to distribution only within their province. They can't go into other parts of the country until they've
Mhm.
proved, they've been audited and tested enough, and they've proved that they can do that. So there's got to be a solution here. I get it. The
Yeah.
test and hold can't work for every single food, but we work under this assumption that it can work for no foods right now. And
Mhm.
I don't understand. We had that peanut outbreak and recall earlier this year. You can't tell me that peanuts would be any worse off if they were held for 24 hours.
Right.
So we have rapid tests and we have a 24-hour hold. And if you're telling me that your food cannot survive a 24-hour hold, then have the evidence, the transparency to prove that not only is it wrong for the specific commodity you're talking about to be held for 24 hours, but you also have demonstrated the ability to make sure that it is as safe as possible. If you can't prove that holding it for 24 hours is going to damage the product. If you can't prove that your company is capable of preventing a multi-state outbreak, then you should not be able to distribute it without holding it for 24 hours and proving that you're doing rapid tests.
Right.
That's my opinion.
And that kind of gets to the crux of it. So let's say that you're in charge of food safety at the company, Darin, and I'm the CEO, and you come to me with this argument. And I have a short shelf life product, let's say 20 days. And you're like, Bryan, we need to do hold and release on this. I'm explaining all of this to you. And you go, And then I leave as the food safety guy. The next guy who comes in the room is going to be the CFO. It's like, hey, CFO, our food safety guy just came in here and said we need to hold our product while we do testing. Well, how long is that going to take? Well, we'll say a 3-day test. Well, our shelf life is only 20 days. The first thing that comes out, this thing, right? All right, well, let's run the financials on that. Oh, geez. If we do that, that's going to cost our company $25 million a year in additional inventory costs and delay on product shipping and yada, yada, yada. And now the CEO is going, oh, geez. Okay, well, stated or unstated, well, all right, well, what's the chances of us having a problem, right? Which gets back to that phrase, Darin, that I say all the time as well. We've never had a problem before.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, we're probably good then, right? Oh, yeah. We'll be fine. All right. Well, screw Bryan, right? We're going to keep doing what we're doing and we'll roll the dice because the odds are nothing's going to happen, right? And that's that decision process that happens at that corporate level, which gets back to the topic of our conversation today, which is we're treating the symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. The plants are where we always go, right? Everything is done at the plant. Say, okay, well, let's institute stronger GFSI programs. Let's institute stronger whatever, you name it. Always focused at the plant. The disease is more than likely coming from corporate. Okay? One of the things, Darin, that I would always do when I worked at a company and I was in charge of quality and food safety is I would sit down with the CEO very early in the process and talk about food safety and say, okay, well, tell me what you know about food safety. What do we do in our company? Just to get a good grip on what that CEO knew within that and to understand what she was thinking. The other piece that I always do to test the CEO is I would see, all right, now, Darin, as the CEO of the company, there's something that you need to understand is everything that we're doing for food safety, But if it doesn't go the way that we think and we have to have a recall, you have to understand as the CEO of the company, you are no longer in charge. I am in charge. I will be making the decisions on what we do. And I'm looking for their reaction, right?
So when you do that, when you're the way you're describing it, so at one point in my life, I used to be a math teacher, and imagine having an equation or having a problem on the board, and a student just gives you the right answer, but they didn't go through the steps. Right? Or they went through the steps wrong. Like you can see their math and somehow it's like, okay, this is wrong. You had an error and then you had another error and somehow you got the right answer, but you went through an error, right? When I hear these conversations, right, here's what goes through my mind. Oh, but it's going to cost us this much to do this. It's going to cost us this much to do this. Okay.
Yes.
But when you look at the variables and you're trying to incorporate all the variables, right? Most companies are not doing the one critical thing that just gets my attention every time. They're focusing on the cost of doing X, like rapid testing or test and hold, right?
Right.
They're not incorporating the cost of doing nothing.
Yeah.
But what if we don't do this? What if we don't do this? Right? Well, it'll cost us $19,000 a month to do this. Okay. But if we don't do this, how much will a recall cost us? Well, $12 million, on a very, conservative side. If we were to truly be calculating the costs of certain things, we have to look sometimes at history. Here's other companies that are dealing with these things, right? No company is too big to be dealing with all these costs. Yeah. Chipotle was one extreme example in terms of the costs of all those outbreaks. Mm-hmm. Even though that $25 million federal fine from the DOJ for their actions was at the time, for a moment there, I guess, the largest federal fine, they lost far more money in terms of the stock value loss, people going elsewhere, and that didn't even take into consideration, lawsuits and things like that, right?
Yeah,
So
during that period of time, their stock went down $7.5 billion in market cap.
yeah, let's get into economics for a brief second. The economic model that was established for this based on earlier outbreaks was that it would take 1/4 of New York Stock Exchange trading to hit rock bottom and an additional 3/4 to get back to its pre-incident value. Chipotle followed that almost exactly, 1/4 of stock market drop, but then they had outbreak after outbreak after outbreak. It took 15, not 4/4 total, but 15, almost 4 times the amount of stock market trading for it to get back to its pre-incident values. That is where the majority of that money was lost. But here's what always sticks out in my mind. Do you realize how small of a percentage they would have to have spent to prevent all that?
Yeah.
They could have, between training and they always say the same thing. We're going to prioritize this. We're going to put someone in charge, give them the resources they need. We're going to hire an advisory board. We're going to review our protocols and our procedures. We're going to review our training. We're going to invest in some new technology and blah, blah, blah. They always say the same thing after these outbreaks. It's like, why weren't you doing that in the first place? There's an estimate out there that the cost of compliance versus the cost of non-compliance, that on average, the cost of non-compliance is 17 times more expensive than the cost of compliance. These things really need to be taken into consideration in terms of it's going to cost us this much if we test and hold and we do rapid testing and we invest in even more rapid testing and do double testing or whatever kind of a thing. Yeah, and it's going to cost you a lot more if you don't.
Yeah.
And it's not only going to cost you, we're talking about it's not just that one carrot company, it's all carrot companies that are under the eye of having lost revenue.
Right.
When we had Jack in the Box, other fast food hamburger restaurants were suffering. Chipotle, other Mexican grill restaurants were losing money. I'm sure with Boars Head, other deli meat companies are probably losing revenue during this.
Right. Well, and this gets back to our theme for here today is this risk assessment process that the senior leadership in the company follows relative to food safety is non-existent or broken, right? And we're getting some really good really good comments in here, guys, relative to that. Kimberly, great point here on how do we get that information out there, right? And this gets back to our theme here of treating the symptoms versus the disease. The disease is originating at the executive level because they don't understand. They don't understand what we're talking about here. It gets back to, we've talked about this with like car insurance and analogies around that. When you get car insurance, you go through a whole battery of questions relative to your driving and how you perform that task. And then there's whole professions out there, actuaries, that's all they do is figure out that risk for the company, because in the insurance industry, man, that's a direct line, right? So managing our risk equals our profitability. They get it, right? And that model is constantly changing. So as we get older, hopefully we get more experience and our insurance rates go down. But if we wreck and we have an accident and we're at fault, guess what? Now the insurance company reevaluates that risk, and that never happens. One of the things, Darin, that I always like to bring up is we have risk by industry, but there's also risk by company. And that risk is constantly changing. And we act like it's static, right? To your point with the food safety plan. All right, here's our severity and likelihood, and there it sits. No. What happens, and someone here earlier had mentioned marketing. All of a sudden, the marketing people come to you, Darin, as the CEO, and they say, we should really start marketing our products and producing products for infants. We're a food company. Why aren't we doing that? Yeah. Let's go make a bunch of money in that market. Whoa. Time out. You guys have just completely altered our food safety risk. Do you understand that? Let's go through that.
Oh, but it's the same thing when, hey, why are we, there was a time where there weren't many breakfast restaurants, right? Except like, Denny's and IHOP, and all of a sudden your Burger King and McDonald's and, Taco Bell and other places are like, hey, we're missing out on the breakfast opportunities here. Let's do all these breakfast foods. And now you got different ingredients, you got different protocols, you got different, people doing different foods. And yeah, there's a new risk factor there. But I'm really glad you brought up the insurance, because we make we make it sound like we're all okay with the insurance companies, and look at what the auto insurance companies does, right? If you're a new driver, you're going to pay more because you're not tested and you have little experience, right? But then you get older, you get more driving experience, your rates can come down. But of course, if you have a speeding ticket or a DUI or whatever, or there's other factors, and of course they want you to be wearing your seatbelt and have airbags and limiting your risk factors, and your rate's going to be lower. The less risk factors you have, the lower you're going to be paying. The more risk factors you have, the more you're going to be paying. Perhaps we need to look at this in terms of the insurance companies for the food industries, because if you're not recall ready, if you're not preventing recalls in the first place, if you're not doing all these rapid testings, those insurance companies are going to be paying a lot of money. Some of this is I believe the whole idea of the, what you're talking about, treating the symptom versus the disease. Perhaps if we were treating the disease, we would be making sure that the companies that are not ready to be doing multi-state distribution, they're not ready to be distributing things without the test and hold kind of a situation. Perhaps there should be more scrutiny, and the best scrutiny is that of the dollar bill, as opposed to anything else in terms of that. And perhaps even the biggest of names, a name that's been around for a very long time, perhaps oh well, this thing doesn't happen to us that often. Okay, but it did happen, and now our insurance premiums are affected by this, and we're paying more for insurance. The sad thing is, though, those companies are going to pay for more insurance. The companies aren't ultimately going to pay more in terms of insurance.
It gets passed on.
Yeah, it's passed on to us as the consumers. So perhaps we as consumers need to remember that we have an incredible role in terms of why would we want that passed on to us when we can just go to another company, go to another store and say, look, we're not going to continue to buy from this company because they clearly don't understand it. They clearly don't have our interests as a top priority in their decision-making element there. When the CEO of McDonald's came out and said, we're really sorry for this outbreak with these onions. But hey, look, we have the McRib. We're going to put the McRib out. Yay, yay. To me, that was like, oh, but look over there. Look over there. Look over there. Here's the question that's going to be raised. Yeah, I do believe that it's unfair for this to have been called a McDonald's recall, because, and there was one person that died, if I remember correctly. Maybe
I think so.
I'm confusing. To me, there's Taylor Farms, there's the distributor, and then there's McDonald's. McDonald's can't say that it's all Taylor Farms' fault, because where was the distributor and where was the end user in terms of doing their own testing and their own auditing and they're taking their own responsibility to make sure that they're not just taking the word from it for other people. When we've been talking about greater transparency and traceability in the United States with the FDA, over the last several years, this is not so that someone can say, I should not shoulder any of the responsibility because I've got the paperwork shows that they took care of all the responsibility. No, everyone still has responsibility to take. And it should never be that the consumer takes not only the full brunt of the impact of the failure, but also the consumer, the end consumer, should not take the full brunt of the responsibility. There is some responsibility that consumers should take. I do believe that. But when we distribute immediately without any kind of holding products across multiple states, with no kill step. You don't cook cucumbers. You don't cook X, Y, and Z. Right? What exact level of responsibility does the consumer have that they can take in this
Yeah. Well, and yeah, so Duncan is making a good point here, right? So it's that personal liability. So back to our analogy here of drunk driving, right? So if you're the CEO rolling that dice, you're kind of like a drunk driver. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go to the bar, and I go to the bar, on Friday and Saturday nights, and yeah, I've had a bit too much to drink, but it's not too far to get home, and I'll take that risk. Works for a little while, and then eventually you get caught, or you get in a wreck, or worse, and then all of a sudden that reality comes into play. So in some ways, that leadership team is using that same rationale and that same logic as that drunk driver, and that's got to stop.
Well, Duncan also brings up that it should never be painless to pay the fines. I have to admit, the horse meat scandal, I know this is going to sound like a complete non sequitur, but the horse meat scandal in Europe,
Yeah.
the guy in charge of the EU's food crime lab in London brought up a very good point. It wasn't that we needed new laws. It was that we needed to start enforcing the laws that were already on the books. And when these companies are breaking the laws, Jack in the Box, they broke the state law in terms of the minimum cooking temperature for hamburgers back in 1993. They came out and said, yeah, we broke the law. 4 people died. There were no state or federal charges filed against them. Right? You have all these other companies, look at, we mentioned Peanut Corporation of America, right? The trial and the sentencing. Name another person who's gone, or another company where an executive's gone to jail over their failure and the deaths of consumers since then. And, do you think that there's going to be questions in terms of Boar's Head, whether or not, someone should be held criminally, strictly personally liable, or kind of like we saw with some of these other companies, with Chipotle and Bluebell and other companies, are they just going to pay a large enough fine and then no one has to go to jail, or no one has to be personally held liable for these issues? Because here's the deal with Boar's Head, that lack of sanitation did not happen overnight. That was a leadership. If they had a leader who said, this is not acceptable, make sure this doesn't happen, it would not have been like that. If we had leaders who said, oh my God, look what the USDA's Food Safety Inspection Service showed us. We can't let this continue. Resolve this right away. No, it was inspection after inspection after inspection. Same thing with earlier, when you have multiple opportunities to be shown where there are problems. And if you don't resolve those problems, that's a leadership failure. And those leaders should be held accountable. But they never really are. They never really are. And Duncan brings up, just this last point, there's no law if there's no enforcement. Same thing on the sports field, right? What is there of a law if the referee, umpire, or whatever looks the other way, and it happens over and over and over again? And we see this playing out on the big screen TV. Well, guess what? This is what's happening with our food in terms of the fact that we have these laws, they're ignored, there's failure, and then no one's held accountable, and then people go on, business as normal. And we, the consumers, are left to blame. And here we're talking about the idea of lower our food prices. I don't want to get political, but for any one person to say, I'm going to come into office and we're going to have lower food prices, that's not as easy as waving a wand, because I do think that, we had the excuse of, well, gas prices have gone up, therefore food prices have gone up. Well, guess what? When gas prices went down, food prices did not go down. And a lot of people assumed that, well, when food prices got higher and higher, that probably meant that they were using better technology and testing, and there was better food safety of these foods. Nope. Oh, well, okay. Well, when we have premium foods, like Boar's Head premium deli meat, then, I'm sure that food safety is at a premium, because when I see a food safety failure at the Family Dollar store or food at the 99-cent store, well, that's not exactly premium food. So if we buy premium food, it's going to be safer. Well, 2024 kind of proved that to be thrown out the window in terms of premium does not equal safer. Higher prices overall does not equal safer. There's a lot, and vice versa. Assuming that our food safety is better, which is allegedly is, does not mean that our food prices come down. So it's a big, it's a big circle, if you will. And I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to be easy to wave a wand and all of a sudden our food prices get lower.
Right. And that gets back to our point. We're almost out of time here, Darin, but we're treating the symptoms. We're not treating the disease. We need to get to the point where the CEO and the board of directors are coming to us as food safety people and saying, hey, listen, we need to reduce our risk in the company. What do we need to do to protect the company and our shareholders and our consumers? Here's what we need to do, right? No, the penalty associated with this is out of joint with the risk, and that needs to be fixed.
Well, we've just recently heard, was it Party City is going to be closing and Big Lots is going to be closing and these stores closing, and it's the way of the business world out there. Well, when are we going to hear, oh, this food company's closing, this food company's closing, this food company? We rarely hear, well, PCA, we did hear that one, but rarely do we hear these companies closing because of all these failures. Kind of a thing. They just continue doing. And this year, we also had Wolverine Beef Company have a recall. They had a massive recall, much larger one 10 years ago. And so these companies where you think that they learned a lesson and they would say, well, the last thing we want to do is have another outbreak or another recall. Let's do whatever we got to do. And then it just happens over and over again. It's this seemingly endless cycle of crisis and reform that never truly has the reform of the disease. It's the reform of the symptoms.
Right. That's a great summary. And with that, right, we need to, as food safety professionals, treat the disease. So as we're going into 2025 and looking forward to the next 30 years within our legacy for food safety, how do we do that, right? And it's my position on this that corporate needs to be looked at for that. Plants were doing all kinds of great stuff. That needs to continue. Corporate is the source of a lot of our woes. And so with that, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that at some point corporate's going to get the message that as consumers, we're not as myopic as they think we are. There's some big lessons that consumers learned and we're going to take into 2025 and say, yeah, this is just not acceptable anymore.
Perfect. Great way to sum up our chat for today. So fantastic topic. Great way to enter 2025. Thank you, Darin, for joining us here today. Always amazing insights, and we're always very happy to have you on the show. And of course, everybody, thank you. Wow, great comments, fantastic information. This is what food safety is, right? This is not a singular activity. This is a community activity where we need to work together as an industry. This goes across everything. It doesn't matter what the food is. It's all the same. So I salute all of you, and I know you're going to continue all of your amazing work in 2025, where we will join you next Friday in January for the next food safety chat, where I'll have another amazing guest like Dr. Detwiler on the show to talk about all things food safety. But in the meantime, enjoy your weekend, reflect on 2025 and all the great things that we're going to be doing. So with that, everybody, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Darin.